In this video, we're going to talk about what's new in Memorial Designer's latest update, which is version 1.375. If you want to know if you're running the latest, just click on the question mark here, and it will tell you the version you're running. So 1.375 released yesterday is the latest version. First things first, the Memorial Designer Docker has been replaced with the Fills Docker and the Panels and Spacing Docker. So it's been split into two. The Fills Docker has two different sections. It's got a favorite section, and then the section down below has all of the Granite fills that are installed. Panels and Spacing hasn't been changed, it's just been moved to its own Docker. And then if you haven't had this already, we also have a Monument Text Docker and the StoneSpot Connect Docker if you use StoneSpot. So let's go ahead and talk about a couple other changes first in the Workspace. I added this button here to show the page border for those users that want to have a page border, especially for cutting to the plotter and knowing how to lay it out on the page. If you click on it, then that means the page border is active. I usually don't show page borders though, just because with CorelDRAW, when you have a page border and things aren't completely inside of it, they end up going to the master page. So you have to be careful with using page borders and make sure you know what you're doing there. This next button over here is for all capitals in case you want to convert fonts that have lowercase, and I put that on there because the Monument Lettering Center fonts have lowercase versions. And sometimes it's nice to just quickly go to all caps. This next tool over here is called Text Spacing for Width, and we'll cover that later. And then the last change is that I've added a button here for direct cut. It's different from the button that they have. It's just this the same icon here, but with an arrow pointing upward like the JPEG and AI PDF buttons. And that is to run the direct cut macro that actually will send everything that's on your desktop, no matter what layer it's on. It will go ahead and do all layers at the same time. Whereas the one that comes from Allen Datagraph, it only will do the current layer that you're on. So first let's talk about Granite fills over here. The favorites fill section, you can minimize these if you don't want to see them, of course, or you can just minimize this one to get it out of the way once you get your favorites set. The favorite fills, if you right click on a favorite, you can unfavorite it, and the way that it got here to begin with is by right clicking down in this section and saying favorite, and that will send it back up here. You can rearrange by clicking and dragging to where you want them to be. You can resize by dragging this slider up and down. If you want it to be to fit exactly on your resolution, if you click on that bar there, and then you can left or right click with your arrow keys, and it will just go up and down a little bit in order to get the tiles nice and perfect there for you. If you right click, you can also say settings, which gives you the opportunity to rename if you want to rename your fill to whatever naming convention you use, and it will also let you now choose a custom tile size, so that in the event that you want to use a much larger or much smaller tile size, you can change that there and then save those settings. Same thing is possible down here. If you right click, you can also go to settings. This icon is called Stain 1, and it associates now to 100% black in your image here. So if there's anything that's 100% black that doesn't have a transparency on it, then what happens is it will change to this stain color. Anything that is 100% white, that again is not a transparency, will turn to stain 2. If you right click on your stain colors, you can set them. So if you don't like having really black litho, you want it to show gray instead, you can go ahead and just click on that and close it. Right click on this one, and let's say you wanted to show gold leaf instead, you could right click on that and either close it or click up here to get out of there. So now that we've changed these, if we go ahead and fill this design, anything that was black, as in the outline of the word here, gets changed to the gray. Anything that was white gets changed to the gold leaf. We can now go back to grayscale here. There used to be a swatch that was grayscales, but we've moved the button here. because not only can you go to grayscale, but you can now also restore in case you want to get back to how you had it filled before. One thing you may notice is now there is a new fill for rock pitching on the face of the stone, and there's also a new fill for starburst. So if we go back to grayscales, this is 40% gray. 40% gray now goes to the rough rock, and 50% gray now goes to starburst. In the past, this would have been rock pitching, and it would have looked more like this, which was pretty ugly because it stretched to the size of the stone. So instead, if we go ahead and fill it in with 40% black, then it will give us this new fill. In case you had previously filled something but you were unsure of exactly what color it was, you can click on it, come over here and click what color, and it will then tell you what color it's been filled with. Also in the past there was an issue where if you had something filled with purple, for instance, if we come down here and look at the CMYK value of purple, it has a 20% black value. So anything that had a 10, 20, or 30% black value ended up getting turned into polish, rock pitching, or frost. And so purple used to, when you would run a granite fill, turn into rock pitching because it was 20% with the black value. But it no longer does that, so this update will not turn purple things rock pitching. However, if you had a previous file that had something purple and it was already turning into rock pitching, what you can do is you can select that object, come over and say forget fills, say yes, and then it would forget that it ever had a granite fill in it. So then when you refilled it, it would, when you change the colors again, it wouldn't fill that in anymore. So to correct that old issue, that's what forget fills is for. The next button over is settings. If you click on that, it comes up with a few checkboxes here. Prompt if nothing is selected. Before, when you would not select anything, you would click on a fill and it would say, would you like to fill all objects? And you can say yes. If you still like to have that, go ahead and keep that checked. I actually think it's faster to not have that anymore, so I uncheck it. Prompt to remove granite fills on save. When you save a file, it asked you before if you would like to remove the fills. And so if I go and save this file, it's not actually asking me anymore because I have that unchecked. If I turn it back on and then resave the file, it will ask, do you want to convert them? You just say yes. But again, I think it's faster to not have it ask, and so I turn that off myself. Restore granite fills after save. Before, it used to be that when you saved the file, it would go to grayscale and then stay grayscale, but now you have the option of having it restore those fills after you save so that it will automatically bring them back. I like to have that one checked. Prompt to restore granite fills on open. When you opened the file that had previously been saved with fills removed, it would ask if you want to bring them back. I uncheck that so that it automatically will go ahead and restore the fills. That way if I close this out and I go to reopen it, it will automatically bring those fills back in when it opens the file. Prompt to warn that fills will be forgotten. Again, that's another one that you don't necessarily have to have, but it just warns you that you clicked on the button. Break drop shadow groups apart. This one we had to add because with the new way that fills are accomplished, if we are to add a drop shadow to something, whenever you run the tool or the granite fills, drop shadows end up being recreated. And so if you have a lot of objects that have granite fills associated with them, then the drop shadows end up getting recreated, which will really slow the system down. So in order to overcome slowing the system down, we've added that checkbox which will automatically break that drop shadow apart from its parent object, so that every time you are adding a fill here, it's not having to rebuild all of those drop shadows. If you want those drop shadows to stay and not get broken apart, but make the system run a little bit slower, under settings you can uncheck that, and that way it will not break those apart, though it will slow the system down. So that's what all of those buttons do. In the Granite fills area, the fills are now sorted alphabetically, and the way that the fills are now stored, if we open up in the fills folder, every fill has its own folder. So if I were to create a new one or take one and delete it, if you delete that folder, come over here and refresh, then that fill will no longer be there. So it's now gone. If I undo that, come back over here and refresh, then it'll come back. But in that manner, you're able to share fills with each other that you create on your own, and get updated fills easier. So if you wanted to create your own fill, there's now a Save Granite Fill button. If you click on that, it will load up this template. These are all power clip objects, and so you would simply bring in or import the image that you want and throw it into each of these power clips. So if I were to, I'm just going to fill this, and you'll see how it works. If I were to fill this in, because I just filled it in this way, I would need to click on each of these and tell it not to show the frame anymore. But if you actually throw stuff into the frame, it's going to get rid of that black mark for you. So I'll just do this manually. So what you do is you get all of your different things set up. You click on the fill button again, or the save button again, and it will ask you for what you want to call it. And then you would click OK, and it would then save that as a new fill, repopulate the list, and it's alphabetical. So if we go to the eyes, India Red HD is what we just created there. Once you're done with it, you need to close the template. Do not save it, that way it doesn't overwrite your template. But now we've just created a brand new fill. We'll go ahead and delete that one. It would have saved it here, India Red HD. So we'll go ahead and just delete that, and again refresh, and that'll get our list back to the way that it was before. In past versions, if you were to take your piece and shrink it down, when you went to refill it, it would actually refill the design with really big, 12-inch tiles. Now though, if we refill it, it remembers the skew and the rotation of your fill, and so it's going to refill it again smaller. Another thing is that if you in the past had applied any sort of skew, so that it was at an angle, this would then not fill correctly. It would end up filling the size of your overall size instead of knowing that skew. But now if we fill it, it will remember that skew and know at what angle it's supposed to be done at. So that can be helpful if you're creating brochures or 3D designs or anything like that, that it now remembers the way that it's supposed to be filled. The last thing to mention with the Granite fills now remembering size and skew is that if we had a fill that perhaps when we go to the settings is set for something smaller. Let me close this one out here. American Rose. Okay, so the setting for American Rose is 8 inches, and this is because it's one of my older fills. So this older 8-inch fill, if I were to go back to grayscale and then fill with American Rose, it's tiling this at 8 inches. So if I switch over to a new fill, it's going to still tile that at 8 inches because it's going based off of whatever it had previously been filled with. It's not going to switch to the 12 inches or whatever this is. If I go to settings for it, it's 12 inches. So it's not going to switch to 12 inches unless I go back to grayscale first and then switch over to filling it this way. Then my grain will be a little bit tighter on the polish there, or it'll be a little bit bigger on the polish there. The reason that that matters is now that each fill can have its own individual size, it opens up the possibility to do more variegated granites. So there's a Rainbow UHD test right here. I haven't done much of anything with it other than build a test file. If I right click on that and say settings, you'll see that it's set for 36. On yours it might even be set for 48 inches. If I just click on it right now, it's actually going to tile every 12 inches, and you can see here that it's going to tile every 12 inches on the polish. That's because it's going off of the 12 inch from the new Imperial Red. If I go back to grayscale, however, and then refill it, it's going to go off of the setting for that particular fill, which is 36 inches. So now you are able to fill the entire stone without seeing any sort of repetition in the fill itself. Now again, this is not the best looking fill, it's just a test, but this does open up the possibility to doing much larger swatches for different granites that have a variegated grain without seeing a repetition. So hopefully here in the near future I'll be updating the granite fills with some new ones that will be done that way. And again, because of the new way that we've built the fills, we'll be able to easily add those to the Docker without much trouble. So I'll just go back to the grayscales here and go back to new Imperial Red. That way it will fill it correctly instead of at 36 inches. If I did this one first, so that it's tiling at 36 inches, if I then went back to this one without going to grayscale first, you'll see how large that grain is because of the way that that fill's been done. So you need to go back to grayscales first and then switch if you're going between granite colors that are at different sizes. Now I'll show you really quick what this button up here does, text spacing for width. So if I were to type in some text, and I had another line of text that was perhaps a little bit shorter, if I want these two lines of text to be the exact same size, what I can do is select the longer one, come up to text spacing for width, say get width from selection, and that's my new target width. So now I can click on this one and say apply, and it will stretch it out to the same size as that one. Or if we want to grab both lines of text, we can give them a specific size, let's say 10 inches, and hit apply, and it would then stretch that out in order to fit. If you don't want to do only word spacing, you can add in character spacing. Just type in a percentage here and hit apply, and that will add character spacing as well. So depending on what number you have here, you can just hit apply. When you type in numbers, it gets added to this list if you want to have it in the list. If you don't, you can right click and say delete value from list or clear list, and that way that list now disappears. But you can set presets there if you want to, have 10, 12, 14, whatever. As a default, you would just type it in and hit enter. You can right click and say add value to list as well. This is also helpful if I were to break this apart and try to get the 1900 the same size as the 1910. Click on that, say get width from selection, click on this one and hit apply, and then it would stretch it out to be the same size. If you haven't yet used the Monument Text Docker, what it does is if you were to have, I'm going to back up here just a little bit. So if I had this line of text and I changed it to a non-monument specific font, let's just say Arial for instance, you'll notice how that shrinks down even though it says 1 inch, it's really only 0.861 inches tall, and that's because the way that the font is built, it's including the ascenders and the descenders in the size of the font, and so it doesn't work quite the same way that we do for monuments, where we're usually at the size of a capital H. So instead I can click on this, and in the monument text docker, here's my reference letter, here's the size I want it to be. I can just hit apply and it would resize and do the math. So it says that it's 1.397 inches in the drop down, but it's the size of a capital H. If I were to just switch that over to just a capital H, then you'll see if I click on it, it is exactly 1 inch right there. Certain fonts don't work very well with the letter H. If I were to go to Monotype Corsiva, for instance, and type in hello, you'll notice that the H actually comes up a bit and comes down a bit there. So the H might not be the best letter to go with. An E might be better, as it's flat on the top, so you can switch your reference letter, hit apply, and then it would go off of the E instead. Hopefully you enjoy all the changes here for this new update, and if you run into any troubles, just please let me know. I've also now put a Memorial Designer item on the bar here so that you can easily get to the different dockers. In case you misplace them, you can just get to them here.